Okay, we are back. It's on the air with Indian River Hauntings. I'm Larry Lawson, along with my partner and co-host, Mr. Chris Huff, out over there in Durham, England. Chris, say howdy to everybody.
Howdy, everybody.
There you go. Going to make you a Floridian yet. And
Yeah,
of course,
ha.
we got my son Ryan engineering our operation from his little burg in Orlando, Florida. Say hi, Ryan.
Hello.
Hello. Another long conversation from him.
Hello.
So it's good to be back with everybody. We got
Uh-oh. Oh,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1 start or
just
what?
just go now.
Okay, hey everybody, it's Larry Lawson, and on the air, and you're on the air with Indian River Hauntings with my partner and co-host Chris Huff, over there in Durham, England. Say hi, Chris, to everybody,
Hi, Chris, everybody.
or should we say howdy again?
Howdy.
Howdy. See, we're gonna make you a Floridian. There you go.
No, we're
And
not. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, 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 definitely
and
no.
we're gonna and my son Ryan in his little studio in Orlando, Florida, is engineering this fine broadcast. Say hi to everybody, Ryan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan.
Hey, we actually got 4 words out of him this
That's
time.
very good
Yeah.
going. That really is.
Yeah,
That's a record.
yeah. Well, we got a really cool show tonight, folks. We got some things that we're going to start talking about and see where it leads us. But want to do my usual thing and start off with giving some shout outs to some good friends. First, um, Scotty Burns and War Party Paranormal, my good friends down in West Palm Beach and South Florida Ghost Hunters, all those folks down there, say hello. They've got a really cool thing down there at the Yesteryear Village and the Riddle House, which was on, I think Ghost Adventures at one time. They do a little event there. So check out War Party Paranormal and South Florida Ghost Hunters for a really cool time down there. Also want to say hello to a new friend, Ting Ripa, founder of American Ghost Adventures. Ryan, up in your neck of the woods in Orlando. And then to Nikki and Sherry, who are both part of our team, the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, which I think, Chris, you're wearing our shirt, right? There you go. There you go. The FBPI symbol. And they own and run Doodlebug Dowsing. It's the only place you want to buy your divining dowsing rods from. They work great, and it's the exclusive rods that we use on all of our investigation and events. Want to say hi to Mary Margaret's Tea and Biscuit, which is a small restaurant in Arcadia, Florida. We'll be there October 5th for dinner and a ghost hunt in Arcadia, where we'll also be investigating the old opera house there and having dinner at Mary Margaret's Tea and Biscuits. So check that place out in Arcadia, Florida, if you're down that way. And of course, Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Susan and Fran have a tremendous operation there, and will be Saturday night for dinner and a ghost hunt. And my good friends Zach and Joe at the Driftwood Inn. And the final shout out is to my good friend Ike Enzi, who on his show IDK Paranormal, check that out on YouTube. He's got great cop stories of the paranormal, and he likes to talk about his beers. Well, we're going to continue on. This is a breakfast stout out of Holland, Michigan. It's got all kinds of stuff in it. They call it an oatmeal stout, but it's got chocolate and coffee in it. It's kind of an interesting thing. And of course, this is turning Chris's stomach because it is not an English beer.
No.
So. But if I forgot anybody tonight, I'll catch you next week. I do want to encourage all of you to hit subscribe and like if you're with us tonight. And certainly, we are live, so type in some questions and send them to us, because I think tonight's conversation is going to be pretty interesting, and you might have some interesting questions. I got a couple here I'm going to go over in a second that were sent to me. But Chris, you got to say hi to anybody? Want to say hello to anybody?
Well, I don't know if anyone's mad enough or sad enough to stay up and watch this over here, but if anybody is,
there.
It's midnight over here. It's gone midnight. Deborah will probably be watching. I hope Deborah, or listening. I hope Deborah is. Good luck, Deborah. I know you got the IOP at some stage. Go along with Larry. Get yourself along to a nice investigation. They promise to look after you. Anybody else who's listening in? Hello, everyone. Back to you, Larry.
Hey, there we go. Couple of questions that came my way from Dan Clarkson. Dan's actually my lead investigator on our investigations with Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. And he was wanting to ask you a couple of questions about when you do the RF airfields, which we're going to start chatting about in a few minutes. Do you use any kind of trigger objects or memorabilia at the airfields?
As I was telling you a little while ago, it's with all the information that I've got coming through with seeing things, hearing things, feeling things, smelling things, everything going absolutely ballistic around me. It's a wonder I can walk and talk at the same time.
Mhm.
I can't. I don't use anything. I'm lucky if I can remember to turn the camera on to record. So
It's
no, I
that
don't use
it's
things.
that enveloping to you, huh?
Yeah. Other people have to operate things for me because literally I can't walk and talk at the same time.
And then you'll get a slug like me that's got no ability along those lines. I tend to like to use trigger objects. In fact, the next time we were over there, which
Oh, absolutely. And,
yeah,
we have in the past used trigger objects when been on investigations at a tin mine at the top end of Weardale, which is here in County Durham. We used tallies. You had to have the tally when you went down the mine, and
Yep.
the tally had to be given back when you came out the mine, so they knew if there was anyone still down there. We used those, and they moved, or were moved, shall we say? So that worked. It's. I would like to use trigger objects, but somebody else would have to monitor the experiment.
Yeah, because everything else just kind of just fills up your mind, so to speak. I guess, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yes. And I come away, and to tell you the truth, I can't even remember what I've been saying half the time because it's just, I don't know, it's all lost.
Now, he also wanted to know how often, not do you, because we understand that happens, but how often do you come across some sort of unwanted interaction with the other side, or something aggressive, or something that's
Very
evil, for lack of a
rare,
better.
very, very rare, very rare. My first brush against something nasty was when I was 15. But I think that was sort of like a hex, a spell, or a summoning, or a sending, which I got rid of. We've got a place near us which is a haunted ruin. There's something incredibly dark there because people have been mucking around with Satanism in the ruins, and
Bad news.
it really was. I'm 1 for 1 with that place, and I'm not going back. It was that bad. The only time I've ever taken any physical damage was at RAF Tholthorpe, where I think we discussed last time. I had this conversation with a flight sergeant in spirit, and he was getting more and more angry, and all of a sudden, whack, and my lip started bleeding. That's the only time I've ever taken any physical damage. So it's very rare, and that's in 45 years of investigating.
Now, here's a question that just came to mind. And it doesn't necessarily have to have been what happened to you at RAF Thorpe. It wasn't Thorpe. Okay.
Tholthorpe.
Full Thorpe.
I
Okay.
know. I tongue twisters over here. Yes.
If spirits are basically energy, you can't really see them. I mean, we've even seen movies and stuff where your hand would go right through the figure if they were to see one. How do they gain the ability to strike you physically? What's your theory on that?
You're starting from a preconception which doesn't exist. It's just something which has come about by word of mouth and popular ideas. There are many, many cases where, even though you're talking about a ghost, for want of a better word, that the apparition has mass, i.e., it sits down on the bed goes down.
Okay.
It has it has weight, it has mass. You've got accounts where people are hugged or cuddled by spirits, so they have the ability to manifest enough to become solid. One of the things I've always said to anyone who'd actually listened to me, who you've got to be crazy to actually listen to me, as we know that spirits have mass and they can appear solid and they can have smells associated and they can speak and they can appear solid. If you walk down the street and you see people on the other side of the street that you don't interact with, how do you know they're not a spirit?
Okay. You don't. I see what you're saying,
You
but
see what
here's
I mean? You
I
can't
do.
you can't sort of quantify and say, oh well, it's got to be misty and it's got to just pass through things because there's no global rule.
Do
Almost
you have any
anything goes.
do you have any theories how this energy that we normally can't see or can't interact with suddenly gains the mass to be able to touch or to move something? Any theory on that one in on yours?
Often it's a sort of spiritualists will come down upon the ectoplasm side that it's formed from ectoplasm. I don't actually go along with that too much.
Really?
Honestly, I've no idea.
Okay.
Honestly, there's so many things it could be, up to and including a time slip where the past and the present overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So you get realities coexisting.
Okay.
It could be anything.
And that's the thing that people don't really get sometimes. We don't know the answers. We
No.
have theories, we have good ideas. As we get more experience, we're able to put more theory with events that have occurred. But the truth of the matter is, we don't know what this entire phenomenon. And here's another question. I think this came from Dan also. So we're at an RAF base, and we're speaking to Sergeant Fury, for example,
Mhm.
and he has a distinct English accent. Why? He's in English. England makes sense. But then you see people that will go to, let's just say, some foreign country, whether it be France, Germany, whatever, and they'll get an English sounding EVP. And the theory's always been there that the voice that you hear is not filtered, but almost adjusted so that you can understand it. Do you understand what I'm saying there? So
Yeah,
my question is,
I've
how does that happen? In
I've
your
had
opinion?
EVPs in half a dozen languages, and some I've still not been able to identify.
As have I. But in the
You
same
know,
token, some people go to another country and get their EVP in English. How does that happen? How do
it
you think that
doesn't
happens?
it doesn't actually have to be anyone. Now you're at an RAF airfield
Hmm.
in the middle of Canada, shall we say, because there were RAF airfields in Canada.
Just like they had in the
Um,
United States, yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're picking up on Australians or Namibians or Russians. You
Hmm.
don't actually have to have someone from the airfield or even in Canada coming through and talking to you. Time and space don't exist as we know them on the other side. You can't go to a place and assume that you can't go to Gettysburg and assume that because you're in the Union lines, you're going to get a Union soldier talking to you. It might be old Fred the cowherd who used to have a farm 3 miles away, who's just decided, hey, there's a light on, I'm going to come and talk. You can't
Okay.
pick and choose. You just get what you get.
But do you have a thought on how an American in Germany could hear a person who says that they're from Germany speak in English? Or do you think that's possible?
I think it's eminently possible. I mean, it comes down to my view on the paranormal, which I tell you every time. Shit happens. I
Okay.
don't understand how it happens, but it happens.
It just does.
Yeah.
And you know what? So many people they're so they've got to understand that we don't have all the answers
No.
yet. But interesting enough, let's talk about tonight's main subject.
So before you do
RAF Air.
that, I do have
Yes.
a comment from Dan
Hey
saying
Dan.
saying spirits that exhibit mass or physical ability seem to be a skill that they can learn to do. Basically saying that
I
they can learn to do that. Do you think
I
that
think
as
I'd
well?
agree with that. Yeah. They tend to be well, no, I mean some that I've read about tend to be longer in residence than others.
Hmm.
So that I mean, the bell in at Thetford is one example that springs to mind without doing anything, which is a rather famous case by Morris Gross. Was it Morris Gross? Might have been Morris Gross. Um, no, it might not have been. Sorry, I'm digressing. It's gone midnight here. Um, a woman comes into the room. She's walked across, and then one night she actually sits down. The bed goes down. She's got mass. She's sentient. She's looking at the people. Doesn't actually say anything, but she takes note of them. So it's a whole can of worms. It's so interesting. But answers, not one.
And see, that's why, Chris. That's why continued investigation and research is the answer. And someday, I know you and I disagree on this. Someday we're going to find that niche, that little narrow path to start finding out some of these answers.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it? It really would.
Oh, I mean, our investigation at the women's club in Sebastian, Florida, last 2 weekends ago now. I mean, we had two women that actually were married to the same guy, and they flat
That's
told
right.
us through our equipment they're staying. They're
Yeah.
not going to go anywhere, and they're staying. It's almost like I'm not going to leave and give it to her. No, I'm not going to leave and give it to her. It was kind of like that. It was very, very interesting.
It's
So,
when I'm called in, um, people sort of say, "Can you come and we've got a problem? Can you come and clear the place?" Well, I might be able to, but I can't force them to go. There's no way I can force someone to go. I mean, how am I going to do it for a start? All I can
mhm.
do is firstly talk to them. But the biggest trick that I tend to use is I open up a little doorway on the other side and I try and get someone to come through and talk to them and take them with them. And
Coax
that's
them.
the easy. Yeah, you have to persuade them that they want to go. I can't,
Mhm.
there's none of this get thee behind me and throwing salt and God knows what. No, that's all rubbish. You've got to talk to them and see if you can get them to go on. It doesn't mean to say they're going to stay gone.
Well, here's a sidebar question for you then. How often have you been involved in helping somebody cross over, uh, and they flat just didn't want to go, or they did come back? Is that a fairly often occurrence?
Not too often to tell you. Well, so saying. Um, Coming back and causing a problem is not too often. Coming back, they do. They drift through.
Hmm.
I remember one of the ones where I had a little child um, who I managed to get his mother to come back and take them through, and it went from this sort of very sad feeling around the place to absolute joy going through. And then on the next
Hmm.
time I was there, this little kid came through and gave me a daffodil, and then
Really?
just went again. Yeah, I've no idea
Yeah.
why he gave me a daffodil, but he did. Gave me a daffodil. So
Wow.
I'm not one of these oh, flowers mean this and this and this, oh, and colors mean this and this and this. He just gave me a daffodil.
Well, we had an interesting thing, and I know we want to get into the RF airfields, but I just got to mention this. There's this one of the older houses in our county. It's called the Holstrom House. We've done a number of investigations there, and thanks to our friends at the Indian River Historical Society, um, have invited us in. But we were doing an investigation one night, and between our equipment, which included dowsing rods as well as the EMF stuff, we were able to interact with two people that lived in that house. And during this conversation, they made it very clear that, yeah, they're here, but they go back and they come back and forth all the time.
Yeah, they come and visit. They drop in. They pass through. They just want to keep an eye on what you're doing. They might visit, grandchildren, great grandchildren. They're
Well,
just, they're us. They're the same as
yeah,
us.
and it kind of flies in the face of a tragedy happened here, so I'm stuck, but I'm sure that probably does happen
That
too.
does happen as well, especially now. The school of thought, especially on battlefields, that you pass over when they're not ready to receive you.
Hmm.
So you're automatically lost, and you're wandering around, and
Ah,
you've just wandered off a little bit, and they can't find you. Now, the realm where you wander off at the moment of death is not the bright light. You go to the light. Always go to the light. It's always go to the light. Never mind. But they lose you. That realm just beyond is closer to us than it is the other side, and that's the medium's job, because we find it easier to find them, and then, to tell you the truth, we're just like the nail that the lightning hits,
uh-huh.
and we're just there and sort of saying, hey, I found this guy, can you come and take them?
Interesting.
I mean,
Interesting.
anybody else who's saying, look at me, I can do this, that's just ego. We're not. It's nothing to do with that. You're just there helping. They do the work.
Interesting concept. Well, we've got folks that want to hear about RAF airfields, so we need to get
Go on.
that way. And I think this is great how you and I connected. Some of you out there that are watching may have remembered I was doing a show on a network out of Canada, the X Zone Radio and TV network. And while I was doing that program, I was looking for guests, and I'm a bit of an aviation nut. Love anything to do with flying. My father was an American, but he was with the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. So I'm just looking for folks that might be interesting to be on the show, and I come across this very eccentric Englishman who uh, specializes in investigating World War II Royal Air Force airfields. And of course, unlike here in the States, those airfields were constantly under attack during the Second World War, heck, even the First World War in some cases. But so I got very interested and reached out to this gentleman. In fact, I don't know if I ever told you, but there was when I was trying to figure out what your website was, Chris, I got a hold of another group, and I thought it was you I was talking to, and it wasn't. But finally, you and I made contact, got you on the show, and we realized we had one heck of a connection. And it was one of the better shows that I did by far. And since then, we've talked nothing but Royal Air Force aircraft, everything to do with paranormal and aviation.
Yeah.
So,
and we've even got you over here, and you've now seen an airfield.
yeah, we did. Yeah, well, I actually saw an RAF airfield before I got over there. We can get into that later.
We'll get into that later, but you've actually seen a bomber airfield.
Yeah, and that was one hell of an experience.
Right.
I mean, it was something. But tell us, tell us about the world of these military bases. Tell us about how you got involved, why you got involved, and what you've discovered out there.
This is a long one. This is a long one.
Well, we still got a good 40 minutes.
Yes, indeed, how I got involved. Mother and father were both Air Training Corps and Girls Venture Corps, which were junior RAF. They both learnt to fly at RAF Hornchurch, which is just to the east of London, really. It's in Essex. So from an early age, I was taken on old RAF airfields, and I was dragged into sort of RAF type museums and RAF air shows and this, that, and the other. I was almost forced to go into the Air Training Corps, but I did enjoy it. But I was almost forced. And then my father used to take me around old airfields, and even at from the age of about 6 or 7, and even then you could wander out onto the old runways and you'd feel the atmosphere change instantaneously. And that's where it sort of came from. And then the first RAF experience was Debden.
That was a Spitfire airfield, wasn't it?
It was indeed. It was 11 Group fighter base. And I was there on a gliding course with the Air Training Corps when I was a 17-year-old. And I got there on my little 100cc motorcycle, riding up 30 or 40 miles from home. And I got into the hangar first one there in the hangar, and I did what you always do when you're a 17-year-old. You break out the sandwiches and you sit with a cup of coffee. And I was sitting there being quiet, waiting for everyone else to arrive. And I just heard the sounds of people working on aircraft in the hangar around me. And it was the sound of people rummaging, that sound like people rummaging in metal toolboxes, the chinky, 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 looking for a particular spanner. And then the sound of someone dropping a spanner, where it goes donk, donk, dink, 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 dink.
What's a spanner? Help us Yanks out.
You call a wrench, I think.
Okay, fair enough.
We don't. A wrench is different over here, but we won't go there. But I was just listening to this. It sounded vaguely distant. It wasn't sort of right. It was all around me, but it didn't quite sound like it was there. So I was listening around. Must have been about 10 minutes this lasted. And then the next Sprog rode in on his motorbike, and it all went absolutely silent. And all we were left with was the creak and groan of a hangar. If you've ever been in an old hangar, you know what I mean about the creaks and groans, and they crack and creak and groan quite appallingly. But what I was hearing was nothing like the creak and groan, and that was my first experience. And after that, I think I was pretty hooked. So every opportunity, I just wandered onto an old airfield and had a look and a feel and tried to find out who was there. I've always had the mediumistic ability. So you go and you have a look and see if there's anybody there. And it just kept going. It used to be easier to get onto the bases than it is now. So many of them are now developed. Quite a lot of them, they're shutting people off because you've got idiots who go into them. They start just vandalizing and lighting fires and spraying their name on everything, and so people just shut them off. Whereas in the 70s, it was just nutters like me who was wandering around them, and they were just quite happy for people to wander around.
And it's so much. I mean, obviously, we have airfields all over the U.S. also, but it's just a different world, I suppose. With all the accidents that do happen, you'd get something. But I mean, in England, you're literally walking on the same airfields that young men, 18, 19, 20, took off in rickety old kites called Hurricanes and Spitfires to do battle to save their country. I mean, the emotion and the energy had to be incredible.
Not so much on fighter airfields, to tell you the
Interesting.
truth. Not
Okay.
even though you've got the Battle of Britain going on, it's a different ethos. The fighter command ethos is this sort of happy-go-lucky, hello, old chap, how you doing? Did you hear about old Wheezy? Yes, old Wheezy bought it yesterday. And that's sort of it. It was just accepted.
Mm.
Bomber command. I mean, I've got to get you on a bomber command airfield because, as what is it? 12 o'clock high.
What a great movie, Gregory
One
Peck.
yeah, when they're waiting for the bombers to come back.
Hmm.
It's tangible. You go onto the old bomber airfields and you wait on the dispersals, and you can actually feel it change at dusk when the RAF the bombers went out, and then from that moment on, it changes to waiting and waiting and waiting, and the atmosphere gets heavier and heavier and heavier, and
Well,
then after a certain time, you get loss when they've realised that so many crews aren't coming back. And it's exactly the same on the USAF airfields, not just the RAF, USAF as well. I mean, some of the losses with the USAF
well,
crews were terrible.
yeah. I mean, I can tell you that my father, who was in Bomber Command, when he was with the RAF, he was in Bomber Command, and he would talk about just because they would eat late in the afternoon
Hmm.
because they flew all night missions, and then you'd go to the mess hall and they'd sit down to eat, and the table next to him that had crew of C Charlie was gone.
Yeah,
And
if you get a chance, have a look at the film Dam Busters.
oh, I have.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
right at the end scene. Well, not quite the end, but when they're in the canteen at the end, and there's
Hmm.
all these spaces around.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
what it's like. You know, you'd come back and there's 5 crews missing, 4 crews missing, and all the space is gone, and then the huts would be cleared out. Just new people coming in. It must have been terrible. I cannot imagine how terrible it must have been.
To be 19, 18, 19, 20
Oh,
years old and know that you're going out again, and the chance of you coming back are slim and none. I mean,
mhm,
the writings that I've read, the books that I've read about people that have experienced it, I mean, I can't even begin to
no.
even think about the emotion that they must have been going through, but their words are very haunting. So you think that's why there's that darker feeling on the bomber airfields?
There's there's a there's definitely a very dark feeling. There really is. It's the same on the USAF airfields. I mean, all you got to do is go to a tower like Ruffham or Thorpe Abbots, and you'll feel it.
It's
You will
hundreds and
feel it.
hundreds. Yeah.
Uh,
USAF, folks, in case you didn't know, is United States Army Air Force, and that's the acronym for the American Air Force over there. So when you hear USAF, that's what Chris is talking about.
it makes a change from bleeding Yanks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No, those of us who know about their military history are only too glad that you came over and helped, and I
Well,
mean that.
I got to be honest with you, Chris. When Ryan and I were over there, and Ryan, you chime in here. I mean, here in this country, we don't get it. Because we never experienced it. But we talk to people over there, older folks as well as younger folks. They the emotion and how they talked about us coming, you'd think, oh, they bloody Yanks are here causing trouble. No, they cared about us being there. I mean, they
Oh yeah.
they felt true emotion. Wouldn't you agree, Ryan?
Definitely. I
It
would definitely
was.
agree with that. With a lot of people that we met, you know, remember there was this one guy in Dawlish that we met when we were buying like some
Oh
souvenirs and
yeah,
stuff. The name
yeah.
is
I forgot about
escaping me,
that.
but the first thing he that's like one of the first things he's mentioned to us, and I was actually really surprised because if you do that over here, No one's gonna mention anything about World War II or anything like that.
Yeah, but this guy did and thanked us. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah,
can't thanked
absolutely.
us, son. But anyway, we digress. I want to get back to
Go on,
your experiences out there.
go on. You'll have to start me off again. Just ask me a question, wind
All
me
right.
up, and let me go.
Well, okay. So how many airfields do you think you have investigated? Just a rough number, an estimate.
Between 1 and 200.
Okay, that's quite a few considering how spread out they are across the country. Number one airfield for paranormal activity, and what did you experience?
Number one airfield I haven't investigated. I want to do Scampton.
Okay,
Scampton is where they took off for the Dams raid.
6-7 squadron, right?
617. Yeah.
617, yeah.
Scampton is very, very haunted. I'd love to get in there. Scampton closes allegedly in 2020. What happens to it after then, I don't know, but I might be able to get on. Where did I have most things happen? I don't know. It's every airfield has something. Every Thorpe, I heard the four engine bomber go over. That was one of my great experiences.
Tell us a little more about that.
Oh, I did last time. We got out of the car. I was investigating with the Middlesbrough Paranormal Group. No equipment, nothing, just unloading all the cases out the back of the car, and all of a sudden, whom, whom, whum, 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 whum. Just 2 or 3 seconds, just the sound of a four-engined heavy going across the airfield. It was a Halifax base of the Canadian Air Force. But that was just it's an unmistakable drone with a whom, whum, whum, whum. And if you've ever heard the engines of a big aircraft going past, you'll know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
So that was that one. Osworth, which is Sunderland, seeing 3 apparitions in one afternoon of
Pray tell.
RAF people just walking past. They've by the desk at in the little shop in the museum. There's a borrowed light opening into the museum, and I just watched someone in RAF uniform walk straight past it. That was the first one. A couple of others just around. You just saw them little glimpses. This had hot and cold places in the hangar. I had to go and ask if they had heating because it was so hot. No, they didn't have heating. And then another part on another hangar in the same complex. I heard a male and a female having an argument. Sort of the domestic arguments that you hear where and as soon as I went into the hangar, there was nothing. There was nobody in there, and all the sound stopped. So that was Osworth. Upward, walking around Upward, we were in one of the old Nissan huts on the airfield, and as we were just standing there was the sound of you know what I mean by the sound of clumpy army boots walking
Oh
on
God,
gravel.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Straight around the outside of the hut. You heard it crunk, 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 crunk as they walked across. It's grass outside.
Okay.
So yeah, while I was in there, this was the mortuary, and I was getting hit by all sorts of people coming out of the shadows and looking at me, and they were all burnt. There were bits of people on stretcher. It was terrible. It was I took me a while to recover from that one, to tell you the truth. You just name it. I mean, every airfield has something. RAF Walmer, First World War airfield, started in 1916, went through to 1920. I was up there. I was looking at the memorial at the side of the airfield. It's a grass field. Looked at the memorial, started walking back down, and then beside me, in spirit, there was a young chap about 20, 21 years old, in just a private, not an officer, in World War One gear, and he just walked down the path with me until I got to the bottom, and he just vanished from me.
Did he interact with you at all?
No, nothing. Just walked by the side of me, just companionably walking down, as though he was walking with me down to the pub. Exactly that feeling. We're just walking
Mhm.
down the pub, nice and friendly, but no, nothing said. Um, almost anywhere you can almost throw a hoop onto an airfield, and I'll tell you, yes, I had an experience there. I had an experience there.
Well, you had an experience, and I can't think of what it was. And the reason it interests me so much is Dad flew Wellingtons, a twin
Yeah.
engine medium bomber, a geodetic frame, very interesting aircraft. And you tell a story, or you're aware of a story of a Polish Wellington squadron where on a training flight one went into the bogs.
No, that's not Polish. That's not
Oh, it
Polish.
wasn't oh, it wasn't
No,
Polish. Okay.
it's RAF. There was typical six crew on the Wellington,
Hmm.
and it came down about a mile from my house into a former mining pond. The video's on my channel if anyone's interested.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I walked down to there, um, and as you walk down the path, all of a sudden it dives down quite a bit as it would have gone into the pond area. It's quite a bit lower.
Hmm.
I just couldn't go any further into it. The feeling was very oppressive. No birds singing, nothing in the area. It just felt oppressive. Then three members of the crew in spirit. Now, when I say in spirit, I'm seeing them in my mind rather than physically.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Three members of the crew in spirit in Sidcot suits, the brown flying suits, Sidcot
Okay.
suits. Yep,
Mhm.
not
Big
RAF
heavy,
uniform, but
big
flying
heavy
suits. Yep,
collar. Okay.
yep. Um, Walked up from the pondish area towards me. Then they sort of vanished, as though they just let me know they were there. And I started getting all sorts of responses from the PSB 11, the Spirit Box 11 that I was
Mhm.
using on that occasion. Uh, at the end of the sort of session, I was becoming overcome with emotion. It was just becoming so intense that if you listen to the video, you can hear me almost cracking up with it. It was too much.
Mhm.
So that's the Wellington there. I did try and get some away. I've got to try and get back down there, but I don't like going down to places on my own. I need someone else to help shoulder the load.
And that's the safest thing to do. Anybody out there that's
It
listening,
is safe, yeah.
if you're investigating, don't do it alone.
Mm.
Not to mention things that like Chris is talking about, but just other things can happen when you're by yourself. Just not a good move. So always
There's
have
all
someone.
sorts of weirdos out there. There really are,
Hmm.
especially in out of the way areas. There's all sorts of weirdos.
So be
Um,
careful.
Kingsdown, it's an oboe station. Oboe
Oh well.
was, yeah, oboe. Um, one sent out one signal, another one sent out another signal, and where they intersected, you got the beep, 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 and then beep, 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 beep. So when they intersected, you got the constant, you drop your bombs.
Hmm.
Oboe. At Kingsdown in near Deal, it was one of these stations. You wouldn't know it now. It's all overgrown with ivy and in woodland, and you can barely trace the concrete bases or the concrete paths. But I was wandering around this and took some recordings, and I could have swore that out of the corner of my eye, I just saw someone pass right beside me. But when I turned around, there was no one there.
Hmm.
Again, no birds singing, really chilly atmosphere.
Why do you think? Why do you think you would get that phenomenon where you spoke about it where the Wellington went down and then this place, no bird singing?
I
Any
don't know.
thoughts on why? Yeah.
Where the Wellington went down, I've had a neighbour saying that she used to ride horses, and horses wouldn't go through there. Full
Hmm.
stop. They would not go through it. They're just sensitive to something that we're not sensitive to, and they don't like it.
Hmm.
It's as simple as I think it's as simple as that. They don't like it, so they avoid it.
Yeah, and once again, one of those things that we need to keep working on to discover what energy is there that's causing that type of reaction, because we see that with animals all the time. A dog will stop, go
Oh yeah.
into a room,
I
and
mean,
and why
this
is that?
this is one thing which is a recurring phenomena on airfields, even in the Second World War. That the military guard dogs, they're not
Uh,
afraid of anything. Full stop. Everyone's afraid of the guard dog. The dog doesn't care. It's mad. You've got occasions where they're walking around with the guard dog, this snarling creature of, from hell, really. And all of a sudden the dog will stop and it will whine and it will not go any further. This is something ferocious and vicious and trained to attack, and it won't go any further. They won't go into hangars. You will open the door, they won't go in. They won't go into control towers. They won't go into here and there. So I'm a great fan of using dogs on investigations, because if the dog says there's something there, there's something there.
Yeah. Now, there's a particular case, and once again, it's involving 617 Squadron, the Dam Busters. And once again, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, 617 Squadron flew a specialized, specially adapted Lancaster 4-engine bomber to drop a kind of like a barrel-looking bomb that spun across the top of the water and hit the dams in the Ruhr in Germany, which was their industrial area, and it was designed to hit the wall and with the spin of the barrel go down to the base of the dam and blow up. A little history on that. But Guy Gibson, the commander of 617, that was kind of an interesting issue with his dog and what happened later on, if I remember correctly.
Am I allowed to say his name?
Understand that it was his name. The name might be offensive to some. We do apologize, but it was a name from the 40s. I tell you, just say N. We'll leave it at that, just to be on the
Just
safe
say
side. I don't want to offend.
It's his Black Labrador.
Yeah.
I don't like being politically correct. I find I'd rather people said said what they thought, but at least then you don't get someone who's sneaky back behind your back and saying, oh,
yeah.
So if people take offense, well, tough really. Anyway, so for not to get Larry into trouble, we're going to say Guy Gibson's Black Labrador. He died. The Labrador was run over on the evening of the dam's raid. When the crews were in briefing, the Labrador was run over. Nobody knows how, because the camp should have been locked down, but he was run over. The dog Gibson asked the chiefy to bury, that's a flight sergeant, the chiefy, to bury his Labrador at the time that Gibson was due to be over the dam on his bombing run, and he did so, and he was buried outside Gibson's office in the watch office. Since that time, a Black Labrador has been seen running around all over Scampton. Not only on Scampton, it's been seen in the officers' mess at Scampton, running around looking for someone. Well, we can guess who he's looking for. During filming of the Dam Busters, part of that was at Scampton. The dog that they were using in the film wouldn't go near the grave. Full stop. It was just doing what I said before, stopping dead, not going near it. And at the end of the film, aficionados who take great delight in picking apart films and looking for minutiae say that there's an unaccounted black dog running in the distance, which nobody can trace. Not only this, now 617 went from Scampton to Woodhall Spa, which is fairly close, still in Lincolnshire. A few years ago, they put up the Dam Busters Memorial in the village of Woodhall Spa. And when they did so, out of nowhere, a Black Labrador appeared, wandered up, insisted having its photograph taken with all the kiddies who were in this school's presentation saying, I don't know why they were there, but they were there for some reason, on this memorial being unveiled. The Labrador appeared from nowhere, just went in, sat next to them to get his photograph taken, and then wandered off and was never seen again. A Black Labrador. Why do I want to investigate Scampton? Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the one on your bucket list.
Oh, it is.
I may have to make arrangements to be there when you get that opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Now, Scampton is also interesting. I mean, we're going slightly off on target, but it's also said that on the night of the 16th, 17th of May, when the dam's raid was on, that at between 7 and 10, when the 3 waves were taking off from Scampton, that if you stand at the end of the runway on the A15, which is the road that goes past the airfield, on the flight path, you actually get the feeling of aircraft flying over.
Hmm. Do you think that is emotion, or do you think it's the energy of those aircraft? A dumb question, but I just got to put it out there.
You know I don't know the answer. I think a lot of it is expectation.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of expectation involved, that they expect to feel the aircraft going over. I've never felt it, but I've never been there to experience it, to tell you the truth. I've got other things to do, but I think a lot of it's expectation that this should happen, so therefore they'll feel a slight breeze and an aircraft's gone over. I don't know, maybe it's just, I mean, the emotional content is just incredible.
Oh God, yeah.
So
And that's so much a part of what we do, is that emotional residue that's been left behind. I mean, that does leave a lot. What is, of the airfields that you've been to, and if they're not USAF, because we're going to talk about them next week a bit, of the airfields that you've been to now, which one would you go back to?
all of them.
Okay.
It's simple. That's the easiest question I've had to answer so far in all the weeks we've been doing this. All of them, every single damn one, even Sandtoft. Now Sandtoft is top end of Lincolnshire, on the border with Yorkshire. It was a training airfield. They were going up in aircraft. It was a Bomber Command training airfield. Sorry, I should have said Bomber Command.
Okay.
They were going up in absolutely knackered aircraft that were so bad they'd been taken out of Bomber Command as unserviceable and given over to Training Command. They were flying these things and engines fell off, wings fell off.
Oh, Lord.
The loss of life in Training Command was horrendous. And it's not, they say 55,000 lost in Bomber Command. That doesn't include training. There was the losses in Training Command were terrible. Knackered aircraft, inexperienced crews, recipe for disaster. Sandtoft was so sad. It really, it was oppressively sad. And I was really glad to get out of there, to tell you the truth. It was so sad. But I'd even go back there.
And I know you got that sad feeling and everything, but did you have any significant events there?
Not an awful lot, no, not an awful lot. Just
the
terrible,
feeling.
terrible sadness, and anger, sadness and anger. There's other places which you go onto any airfield. Sorry, my mind tends to wander all over the place as a new idea comes and clicks into my mind. Metheringham, Metheringham's got certain stories associated with it, which I'm not going to go into. Down on a former runway, there is now the memorial. The runway is now a road, so you can actually go freely onto it and stop off at the memorial as long as you want. That is really quite emotional. For some very strange reason, it sort of gets very cold and it feels like people are wandering past. That'll be one to get you out on at some stage. The one of the most emotional places I've been, though, was Kelston, which again is Lincolnshire. Lots of reports of Lancasters being heard on the airfield and airmen being seen. My overwhelming memory of Kelston was it's very lonely, very, very remote. And I was there with my friend Mark, who's another medium, and it was as though people were coming out of a mist in spirit. They were just coming out of this mist, and they were all saying, "Why am I here?" And I'm buggered if I could tell them, but they were all saying, "Why am I here? Why am I here?" And it was aircrew. There was a woman with a check skirt and a check jacket and a red. I seem to remember a red jumper on, and all sorts of people. Just, why am I here? That's what I remember from the place.
That actually got me off my. I'm just kind of almost feeling that it got me off my my train of thought for just a second. Before we go any further, I do want to mention this, folks. If you're out there and you're not familiar with it, go to Spirit Research Northeast. If you go to YouTube, Spirit Research Northeast, that is where you're going to find all of Chris's airfield. Not just airfields, he does a ton of different things, including one Bigfoot that we're going to talk about eventually. But that's
We'll
where,
have one on Bigfoot, yeah.
yeah. But because he's had that experience in England also. But check out all of his offerings on Spirit Research Northeast on YouTube. Really some interesting stuff. And he starts every episode with a history of the airfield, an overlay of it.
No, only some of them. Only some
Only
of them.
some of them? Okay, well,
Only some of them. I try and make it as interesting and as arty-farty as I can, but
well, you
only
do a
some
good
of them.
job. You do a good job because they're really fascinating. And also, I know you don't like me to bring it up, but you've authored 3 books on the haunted RAF airfields over there in England. Is it 3, correct? Because I have
It's
1.
3.
Yeah,
It's 3.
So,
To my
uh,
eternal shame, it's 3.
we argue about that all the time. It's really, I mean, just the information he has, folks, is unbelievable. Do you mind if I talk a little bit about Riddle Field?
We should do. We should do,
Yeah.
because that's one of your investigations.
Yeah, and I know we've mentioned it in an earlier broadcast, but um, I didn't even realize this. I considered myself to be pretty proficient in the history of the Second World War, particularly the aviation end of it, with my dad being in the RAF and whatnot. But I didn't even realize this until we talked about it. And over here in the United States, we had 5 airfields that the British leased from this country, and we did the basic training. It was here, and they had some in Canada, and I believe some in Australia too, where we did basic training for British airmen. And down here in Florida, there were 2 of them, but the one closest to me was Riddle Field, and they actually had 2 fields, one in Belglade, Florida, and the other in Arcadia, Florida. And during their training time there, and it was designated the 5th British Flying Training School, and it was all British and Commonwealth pilots, and they trained here. 24 young men gave their lives here in this country training to go back home, and they never made it back. And I'm going to put this. This is very important to me because of what the folks of Arcadia have done. Warms my heart beyond any
Yeah,
description.
I've seen the images and seen the
Oh,
videos, and they care for the graves. They care
oh
for
yeah.
these people.
Tw-
They've been adopted, and from me over here, thank you to the people of
yeah.
Arcadia. Thank you.
It's in the old cemetery there. 24 graves, 25 actually, because Mr. John Riddle, who
He is.
gave the property for the airfield, is also buried there. But these young men, I've been there a number of times, and you walk down the rows, the very well kept grave sites of these men, and some of their families still come over. You'll see pictures on there occasionally, or little knickknacks from people visiting. 19, 20,
Yep.
21. Very sad. And Evan, Ryan's younger brother, who does have the gift as you do, sat there one day and talked to a man who I think we pretty well determined he was not wearing an RAF flying suit. We think he was an American, probably an instructor. Was sitting there almost guarding over the field. Um, that was kind of interesting. And you know what? And let me get your thought on this because I think we've talked about it before. Evans says they're not there anymore.
Probably
Evans says
not.
that Evans says that they're gone.
Yeah.
None of the men that died there are there in spirit. I found that interesting.
But
So,
you might get them wandering back, but just wandering back. I'm not a great fan of cemeteries. I'm not a great fan of
yeah,
churchyards.
yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, you do get some people who are, for want of a better word, trapped because that's where they believe they have to be. Until you go and sort of say, well, look, you don't need to be here, mate. I'll open the door and we'll bring someone through and they'll take you on. You can release them, but some I sort of just think they have to stay there. But I don't think the RAF types or aviator types come into that that mindset. I think they actually want to go down the pub. which brings me on to somewhere that I would love to do a pub after hours in the small hours of the night where a squadron had its watering hole, where all the squadrons, they all had their particular pubs. When
Yeah,
you
yeah,
went
yeah.
down, I would love to do a squadron pub after hours, 3 in the morning, and see what comes through.
Do you have any in
Because
mind?
oh, anywhere, literally anywhere around an airfield which was used in the Second World War, I guarantee it. Especially the bombers, because they drank heavily, really
Mm,
did. You can imagine it. You're not on all the time that you're on missions. You can't drink.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Come off missions, you're down that pub and you're raising hell.
mm-hmm.
And there's
Yeah,
so many reports of aircrew being seen in these places that I'd love to go and do them. Maybe I will.
yeah.
Maybe I will. Maybe we'll sort one out for when you come over.
That
So I
would that
do
would
have
be
a
good because
question.
we've got. Oh yes, yes.
Yes, so it's from Dan, and his question is it possible that investigating sites can actually summon the spirits there when you go?
Yes and no. Sorry.
Okay, let's split the
Yeah,
baby a little bit there.
yes and no. Not as in any sort of necromancy. Not as in
Ah, I see
I,
what
I'm
where you.
I'm bringing spirits in deliberately because I want to talk to Abraham Lincoln, and
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln will appear. But if you get activity going on, you're going to generate interest on the other side with the spirits who are in that area looking on and saying, "Oh, this looks interesting. Interested in what's going on," and they'll come and watch. Or if you've got a medium doing communication, you put a little light on the other side when you're doing this communication, and the spirits see the light and they're attracted like moths to that light to say, "Look, I've got a chance to come and say I'm still here." So yes and no.
Yeah, but that makes sense, and the answer truly can be yes. That's a very good point, Dan. And one thing that we want to caution everybody on: don't don't summon, don't ask things to come to you because you may get something you're not expecting. Because we always don't always know what's coming through. But um,
I think we'll have to
point,
do
point
one of these sessions on protections and
that's
pitfalls,
coming
and
soon. Yeah, that's coming
we're
soon. I
going to have
think.
to.
So, hey Ryan, is there anybody else out there we need to say hi to tonight?
All right, so the people that are here, we have Dan,
Hmm.
we have Commanding Judge Dredd,
Hi,
Oh, good to see you, Judge.
that's Paul. He's up in the top end of Scotland.
Ah, okay. Good to see you again, my friend.
Tell
Deborah,
him,
and
tell.
Ike.
No, hello,
Deborah and
Deborah.
Ike. Hey,
And
Deborah.
and if you're listening, Paul, get off and do RAF Banff for me. I want one from Banff. Banff was a
Is it-
strike wing.
Uh,
Mosquitoes going out, taking on shipping.
oh
Strike
God,
wing.
yeah, the mosquito, the wooden wonder.
Absolutely.
That was a hell of a bird. Yeah, you're working on a big what 1/24th scale?
1/24th mosquito. Yeah.
Yeah, I just finished my 1/48th. Is Ike still on, Ryan?
Uh, I
Oh.
don't know. I can't tell that.
Okay. Okay.
And
Well,
then
Ike, if you're still on.
we just now got a Michael Maxwell, if you want to say hello to him.
Hey, Michael Maxwell, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for all of you joining us tonight. Um, don't forget to like and share too, and let everybody know that we're out here. Now, when we get together next week, because we're just about put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, we're getting close to the end of our time. We're going to continue this discussion next week. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Army Air Force bases, and you've done a few of them, haven't you?
I've done one or two.
One or two.
One or
Uh,
two.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But if you're interested in wanting to know about specific airfields, I know I had turns out to be a first cousin that flew B-17s out of Polebrook,
Hmm.
and we talked about that the other day. But if you got an airfield, a relative that you knew maybe flew out of England, we'd love to hear about it and bring it up, and we'll see what the master here knows about that field.
As I said to you earlier, there'll be a lot of umming and ahhing while I go away and look it up. Because
That's
I've
okay.
I've got when I started doing this, I thought, oh, 60 or 70 haunted airfields, that's going to be tops. I can rattle this off. I've got 200 or is it over 230, 240 something now, which have hauntings
Mhm.
going on at. or
Mhm.
have had hauntings going on out. And almost every day I find something new. Whenever I look, I find either new accounts from one that I've already got in my little collection, or a whole new airfield to include.
Mhm.
And on it goes, and on it goes, and on it goes. So what started as sort of looking into this and documenting it maybe 15 years ago, it's ongoing.
Mm.
I'm getting a bit tired of it, to tell you the truth, but it's ongoing.
Yeah, yeah. I don't see you ever getting tired of it. I mean, our trip to RAF Elvington, which was it was Bomber Command Halifax's early on. Then they switched over to Free French Halifax as the Free
Yeah.
French flag there. But and Ryan tends to be very, very stoic, very matter of fact. But you got to agree, Ryan. When we were in the watchtower, control tower at Elvington, and the millimeter went off. Do you remember that, Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty significant. We talked about it in an earlier show. Uh, just the emotions that are in there, and you can just feel it. It's palatable.
We'll see if we can get you into Colby Grange
Colby
next time that
Grange.
you're down. Colby Grange. Oh, I've had plenty of experiences at that place.
Well, my dream would be Thorpe Abbott's because that's where the Bloody Hundredth flew out of.
They don't let you investigate,
No,
but
really.
they let you investigate at Rougham,
Rougham.
Bury
Okay.
St Edmunds. Now
Okay.
that is really haunted. It's a good place to do. So maybe get that organised for your visit over.
Well, and folks are wondering about this trip we're taking over. Yes, we're going over there, but folks, bear something in mind. Part of our reason for going over there is to put something together to take you over with us in the future. So keep your eyes open, your ears peeled for that future, because Chris and I are going to show you what it's all about over in that
Well,
neck of the woods. We're going to try. How about that?
we're going to try. Yeah, there's no guarantees in the paranormal world.
Oh
That
man.
stuff.
Yeah, if you ever, folks, run into somebody that tells you I can definitely do this and that when it comes to the paranormal, turn and go the other way because
Yeah,
there's
pretty
just
much. There's
there's
you can't guarantee anything. You can
yeah,
go to the most haunted place in the world, and it'll be an off night.
yep, yep, absolutely. So, well, I think we've hit the end of our rope tonight. Ryan, you got anything to add, buddy?
I do not.
You do not. The man of so few
I
words.
do not. 3 words. That's even
Yeah,
better.
I didn't say
yeah.
yes,
Three.
no.
Did you see? This is what I'm saying. He doesn't say no. He says I do not. It's 3 words now. He's
Yeah.
getting quite erudite in his old age.
I don't. I could say that.
Well, anyway, join us again next week, folks, when we continue talking about the haunted airfields of the RAF. Chris will regale us again with some of the stories that have happened over there, and we're going to not only talk about RAF fields, but also concentrate on United States Army Air Force fields too, and some of the things that happened there. It was a rough time in our history, and some of it still stays to be examined by those that are still interested. So, Chris, anything you'd like to say as we wrap it up for tonight?
Can I go to bed now?
Yes, you may go to bed now, Chris.
Thank
But
you very much.
we appreciate you being here. Remember, folks, he's over in England. This is a one unique thing about our show. We're doing this across the pond and giving you hopefully an insight that most people don't get by two old farts that have been doing this for a while. So, with that, I guess I'll bid you adieu, my dear friend.
Yep, indeed. Another one down.
Another one down, folks. Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. We want to get more folks out there. We want to hear more questions from you. Appreciate your time. And until we see you next week, we'll see all of you on the other side. Have a good night, all.
Bye.